Imagine waking up in a world where winter isn't just a season, it's an enemy. The wind howls like a living beast. Snow piles higher than a man's chest. The sun disappears for weeks, sometimes months. Your breath freezes in your beard. Outside, wolves circle. Inside, survival depends on whether the walls around you were built wisely or poorly. This was the Viking world. Long before central heating, electricity, or insulation foam, Norse families faced winters so brutal that a single mistake in construction could mean death. And yet, against all odds, the Vikings didn't just survive, they thrived. Their secret weapon wasn't only their swords or their famous ships. It was wood, earth, fire, and one extraordinary structure known as the longhouse. These massive wooden halls were more than just shelters. They were heat traps, storm fortresses, social centers, and symbols of power. Entire families, their livestock, and multiple generations lived together under a single roof, bound against one of the harshest climates on Earth. To understand how Vikings built longhouses that could withstand such cruelty, we must first understand the land that shaped them. Scandinavia, between the 8th and 11th centuries, was unforgiving. Norway's fjords funneled icy winds down from the mountains. Sweden's vast forests froze solid. And Iceland, newly settled, was a land of volcanoes, battered by North Atlantic storms with very few trees. Winters weren't just cold. They were long, dark, and deadly. Temperatures regularly dropped far below freezing. Crops failed, food spoiled, timber cracked under the pressure of the cold, and roofs collapsed under the immense weight of snow. A poorly built house didn't just mean you were uncomfortable. It meant frostbite, illness, or even starvation. The Vikings learned this lesson the hard way. Your house was your lifeline. And so, the longhouse was born not as an architectural choice, but as an absolute necessity for survival. Unlike the grand Roman villas or towering medieval castles, Viking longhouses weren't built to impress outsiders. They were built for one primary purpose: to endure. They were designed to trap heat, resist the wind, and withstand decades of punishment from the elements. Most longhouses stretched between 50 and 250 feet long, but were relatively narrow and low to the ground. This shape wasn't accidental. A long, low profile reduced wind resistance, allowing gales to sweep over the structure rather than battering it down. It also kept the precious warmth generated inside close to the earth, preventing it from escaping. The walls were incredibly thick, sometimes over 3 feet wide. They were constructed from heavy timber frames, and the gaps were packed with whatever was available: turf, clay, stones, and sod. This combination worked like natural insulation, locking heat inside while blocking the icy air. To a Viking, a thin wall wasn't just a sign of bad craftsmanship, it was a potential death sentence. The construction process began long before a single tree was cut. Viking builders carefully selected the site for their future home. They looked for natural windbreaks, like hills or dense forests, that could shelter the house from the worst of the storms. They chose a spot with a slight elevation to avoid flooding from melting snow in the spring. And of course, they needed to be close to a source of fresh water, but far enough away to avoid being exposed to coastal storms. Many longhouses were even partially sunken into the ground. By digging the foundation a few feet down, the earth itself became part of the walls. This technique, known as earth sheltering, helped stabilize the indoor temperature. The ground would keep the house cooler in the summer, and more importantly, much warmer in the winter. Nature wasn't something to be conquered. It was a partner in construction. Now, despite the popular image of Vikings living in endless forests, wood wasn't always plentiful, especially in Iceland. Timber had to be harvested carefully, transported long distances, and was often reused from older structures. Vikings were master recyclers out of necessity. They favored oak for its incredible strength, using it for the main support beams. For other parts of the structure, they used pine and spruce for their flexibility. In treeless regions like Iceland and Greenland, settlers relied heavily on driftwood that washed ashore or even whalebone. The timing of the harvest was also critical. Trees were cut in winter when the sap levels were low. This made the wood more durable and resistant to rot and insects. Nothing was wasted. A single beam from a longhouse might serve that family for 3 generations. But here's something that might surprise you. There was no chimney. The smoke from the fire simply filled the room, slowly finding its way out through small, strategically placed vents in the roof or through the gaps in the thatch. While this sounds unpleasant, it served several vital purposes. The smoke preserved the wood of the roof beams, making them last longer. It repelled insects and other pests. And it was perfect for smoking and drying meat and fish that hung from the rafters, preserving food for the long winter. The fire provided everything: heat, light, a means for cooking, and protection from the darkness outside. At night, the families didn't sleep in separate rooms. They slept on raised wooden platforms that lined the long walls, wrapped in furs and wool blankets. They huddled together, sharing warmth with each other and often their most valuable livestock, which were brought inside during the coldest months. Yes, you heard that right. Cows, sheep, and goats often slept in a designated section of the longhouse. Their body heat was a valuable resource, contributing to the overall warmth of the space. It was a communal, multi-species survival strategy. One of the most ingenious features of Viking longhouses was their ability to breathe. The roofs were typically thatched, made from layers of grass, reeds, or straw. This material allowed moisture from inside, from breath, cooking, and the animals to escape, preventing condensation and rot. At the same time, a well-made thatched roof was incredibly effective at keeping rain and snow out. In many places, a layer of turf was placed over the thatch. This turf roof added another thick layer of insulation, and sometimes it would even sprout grass and flowers in the summer, making the house blend into the landscape. In winter, this design became even more brilliant. Snow would pile up on the roof, but instead of being a danger, it acted as a natural thermal blanket. The thick layer of snow would insulate the house even further from the freezing air outside. The colder it got, the warmer the house stayed inside, thanks to the snow on its roof. This wasn't luck. It was the result of centuries of brutal trial and error, of learning to work with the environment instead of against it. The Viking Longhouse was more than a building. It was a self-regulating ecosystem, a machine for living designed in perfect harmony with a harsh world. It was a testament to Viking ingenuity, resourcefulness, and their unyielding will to survive. These structures allowed them not just to endure the winter, but to gather, feast, tell stories, and build the communities that would go on to change the course of history. The sagas were born in the smoky warmth of these great halls, proving that the greatest triumphs often come not from fighting the storm, but from building a home strong enough to wait it out. Thanks for watching. If you're fascinated by the incredible engineering of the past, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories of human ingenuity. We'll see you next time. When night fell in the Viking world, darkness didn't simply arrive, it swallowed everything. Outside the longhouse, the wind screamed across the frozen land, rattling tree branches like bones. Snow drifted against the walls, sealing the structure in white silence. Wolves howled somewhere beyond the firelight. The cold pressed down like a living weight, testing every crack, every beam, every mistake. Inside, life continued. The longhouse was never quiet. The fire crackled at its center, sending sparks into the smoke-filled air. Shadows danced along the timber posts. The smell of burning wood mixed with wool, leather, cooked meat, and earth. This was not comfort as we know it, but it was survival. Viking Longhouse wasn't a private home. It was a shared world. Entire families lived together: parents, children, grandparents, unmarried relatives, servants, and sometimes slaves. In larger settlements, a single longhouse might shelter 30 to 50 people through the winter. Privacy didn't exist. Instead, warmth came from closeness. Sleeping areas lined the long walls of the house. Raised wooden platforms, called sets, were covered with straw, animal skins, and heavy wool blankets. Families slept side by side, often fully clothed, wrapped tightly to conserve heat. Children learned early to sleep through noise, snoring, coughing, livestock shifting, the constant pop of burning wood. Winter nights could last 16 to 20 hours. The longhouse had to keep everyone alive until morning. To modern eyes, one of the most shocking truths is this: Vikings brought their animals indoors. During the harshest winter months, cows, sheep, goats, and sometimes pigs were housed at one end of the longhouse. A low wooden partition separated humans from livestock, but not completely. Their body heat mattered. A cow produces a surprising amount of warmth. In extreme cold, that warmth could mean the difference between life and death. Animals also needed protection from wolves and freezing temperatures. And keeping them alive meant milk, meat, and survival in spring. Yes, the smell was overwhelming. But Vikings understood something crucial. Comfort was optional, survival was not. At the heart of the longhouse burned the hearth alone, shallow fire pit running lengthwise down the center of the floor. This fire was sacred. Letting it go out in winter was dangerous, sometimes fatal. Rekindling a fire in freezing conditions without modern tools was difficult. And without heat, the longhouse would quickly turn into a wooden tomb. Someone was always responsible for the fire, feeding it, watching it, protecting it at night. Embers were banked with ash to keep them alive until morning. The fire did more than warm bodies. It dried wet clothes, cooked food, boiled water, melted snow, and provided light during endless darkness. Above it, wooden racks held meat and fish, slowly smoking and preserving for months. Smoke filled the room, stinging eyes and lungs, but it also killed parasites and preserved the roof beams. Even discomfort had a purpose. The genius of Viking longhouses wasn't found in decoration, it was in physics. The thick, turf-packed walls trapped heat, the low ceiling prevented warmth from rising to high, narrow shape reduced air circulation. Few windows meant fewer heat leaks. Doors were small and often faced away from prevailing winds. Some had short entrance tunnels, cold traps that prevented icy air from rushing inside. In extreme weather, Vikings hung extra animal hides over doorways, creating layers of insulation. Snow piled against the outer walls, forming an insulating barrier. What looked dangerous was actually helpful. Snow blocked wind and sealed gaps. The colder the winter became, the more the longhouse turned into a cocoon. Winter wasn't a time of rest. Inside the longhouse, hands were always moving. Women spun wool, wove cloth, repaired clothing, and prepared food. Men sharpened tools, repaired weapons, carved wood, and planned voyages for spring. Children learned skills by watching and helping. Storytelling filled the long hours. Sagas were spoken aloud, stories of gods, heroes, and ancestors. These tales weren't just entertainment. They preserved history, taught values, and strengthened identity. When the world outside felt hostile and endless, stories reminded Vikings who they were. Despite the shared space, Viking society was highly structured. The head of the household, the husbanda, sat closest to the fire along with honored guests. This position wasn't just about warmth. It symbolized power, leadership, and responsibility. Slaves' thralls slept farther from the hearth, near draftier walls or animal areas. They worked longer hours and endured harsher conditions. Winter exposed inequality brutally. Where you slept mattered. Surviving winter wasn't only about architecture, it was mental. Weeks of darkness, confinement, and cold could break even strong people. Vikings fought this with routine, work, and ritual. Feasts marked important dates. Small celebrations broke monotony. Shared meals reinforced unity. Even humor, often dark, played a role in keeping spirits alive. The longhouse wasn't just shelter from cold, it was protection against despair, and it worked. Generation after generation survived winters that would have killed unprepared societies. To a modern engineer, a Viking longhouse looks like it shouldn't exist. There's no concrete, no steel beams, no insulation foam, and definitely no blueprints. And yet some of these structures stood strong for over a century, enduring brutal storms, deep freezes, and tons of heavy snow. This wasn't primitive luck, it was sophisticated engineering, born from experience and the harsh reality of survival. One of the most mind-blowing facts about Viking longhouses is that they were built almost entirely without metal nails. Iron was precious, reserved for weapons and tools, not for construction. Instead, Vikings became masters of joinery. They used techniques like mortise and tenon joints, where a carefully carved tongue fits into a hole. They locked beams together with wooden pegs called tree nails and used lashings made from animal sinew. Each piece of wood was shaped to fit another perfectly. Here's the genius part. As the structure settled under its own weight, especially with heavy snow on the roof, the joints didn't loosen, they tightened. The heavier the load, the stronger the frame became. This created a flexible structure, while a rigid building would crack under the pressure of freezing and thawing ground. The Viking Longhouse moved with the earth. It was a lesson they learned from building their legendary longships. The house was essentially a ship turned upside down and planted in the ground. The skeleton of the house was formed by massive vertical posts sunk deep into the earth. Horizontal beams connected these posts, and the roof rafters arched upwards, creating that iconic curved shape. This curve wasn't just for looks, it was survival math. It helped shed snow efficiently, preventing it from piling up and causing a catastrophic collapse. A flat roof meant death. A curved roof meant survival. Once the timber frame was up, the Vikings filled the gaps, turning the house into a thermal fortress. The walls were a brilliant combination of layers. They might start with an outer wall of stone or wood, then a thick layer of packed turf grass with the soil still attached. This was their secret weapon. Turf trapped air, blocked wind, and provided insulation comparable to many modern materials. In some places, these turf walls were over a meter thick. When snow piled up against the outside, the house didn't get colder, it got warmer. Nature itself became part of the insulation. The roof was the most critical element. It was a multi-layered system designed to be waterproof, heavy, and insulating. First came wooden boards or woven branches. On top of that, a layer of birch bark acted as an incredibly effective waterproof membrane, staying flexible even in freezing temperatures. Then came the thick, heavy blocks of turf, often with grass still growing on top. This massive weight pressed down, stabilizing the entire structure while the grass roots helped bind it all together. In winter, a blanket of snow on the roof added yet another layer of insulation. The longhouse didn't fight winter, it partnered with it. Now, you might be thinking, an open fire in the middle of a wooden building sounds like a recipe for disaster. But the Vikings engineered around this risk. The central hearth sat on a base of packed earth or stone, never directly on wood. A carefully placed opening in the roof allowed smoke to escape while minimizing heat loss. The smoky air near the ceiling actually lowered oxygen levels, making it harder for a fire to catch. Still, the danger was real, and Viking households had strict rules. No unattended flames and constant ash removal. A single spark could be devastating. They also mastered drainage. The floors were often slightly sloped, with shallow channels to guide moisture away from the living areas. Sleeping platforms were raised off the ground. This simple design prevented rot, mold, and kept the interior dry and warmer. Every small detail was a matter of life and death. Interestingly, longhouses weren't meant to last forever, and that was intentional. Wood rots, turfy roads. Instead of fighting this, Vikings planned for it. Individual posts could be replaced without dismantling the entire house. Walls and roofs could be renewed every few decades. A longhouse was a living building, constantly maintained and adapted. And they did adapt. In Norway, roofs were steep to handle heavy snow. In Iceland, where timber was scarce, turf and stone dominated construction. The core principles remained the same, but the execution changed based on the local environment. Adaptation was the Viking superpower. Here's the final surprise. In the extreme cold, a humble Viking longhouse often outperformed a mighty medieval stone castle. Stone absorbs cold, takes forever to heat, and creates damp, miserable conditions. The longhouse, built from wood and turf, breathed, flexed, and insulated. A castle was built to impress enemies. A longhouse was built to defeat winter. Thanks for watching. If you found this as fascinating as I did, hit that subscribe button and join us for more deep dives into history's hidden engineering. See you next time. To the Vikings, a longhouse was never just a building. It was a statement. Its size declared wealth. Its warmth proved leadership. Survival through winter showed the favor of the gods. In a world without written laws carved in stone, architecture spoke louder than words. From the outside, Viking longhouses looked similar, long earth-colored. But step inside, and differences became obvious. Powerful chieftains built long houses that stretched hundreds of feet. Their central hearths burned brighter, their roof beams thicker, their walls better packed with turf. These houses could shelter warriors, travelers, craftsmen, and entire extended families. The longhouse was the chief's throne room. Feasts were held here, alliances were forged here. Disputes were settled under its roof. If you were invited inside during winter, it meant protection and favor. A weak leader had a cold house, and everyone noticed. At one end of the longhouse stood the high seat and vegisciler. This wasn't just a chair. Carved wooden pillars flanked the seat, often decorated with symbols of Odin, Thor, or ancestral spirits. From here, the household leader ruled, hosted guests, and judged conflicts. The location mattered. The high seat was positioned to command a full view of the hearth and sleeping spaces. Power flowed outward from the fire. Even seating order during meals reinforced hierarchy. The closer you sat to the fire, the closer you were to power. Winter made these symbols impossible to ignore. When warmth was life, proximity meant everything. Longhouses weren't separate from religion, they were religious spaces. Before Christianity reached Scandinavia, Viking families honored the Norse gods within their homes. Small offerings, meat, ale, carved tokens were given near the hearth. The fire itself was sacred. It connected Midgard, the human world, with the divine. Smoke rose upward like a prayer. Ancestors were believed to watch from the shadows. Certain longhouses contained ritual posts, believed to house protective spirits. Some were buried beneath the floor to guard the household. A longhouse without spiritual protection was considered vulnerable, just too cold, but to fate. Winter festivals were essential. When darkness stretched endlessly and food stores dwindled, Vikings gathered for communal feasts inside the longhouse. These events weren't indulgence, they were psychological survival. Mead flowed, meat roasted. Stories echoed. Feasts honored the return of the sun, the gods' protection, the survival of another year. Yule, the great winter festival, transformed the longhouse into a place of light and noise, pushing back despair. The walls absorbed laughter as much as heat. Longhouses were also courts, without written contracts. Memory mattered. Disputes over land, marriage, and honor were settled publicly, witnessed by the community. Words spoken inside the longhouse carried weight. Breaking an oath sworn by the hearth invited shaman divine punishment. Sagas were repeated again and again inside these walls. Children learned who they were by hearing who their ancestors had been. The longhouse preserved history, not through books, but through voices. While Viking culture often highlights warriors, winter survival depended heavily on women. The lady of the house controlled the keys, literally. Keys symbolized authority over food stores, textiles, and daily operations. She managed food preservation, clothing production, hearth maintenance, household discipline. In winter, her role was critical. A poorly managed household starved or froze. A well-managed one endured. The longhouse amplified her power. Losing a longhouse was catastrophic. Fire, feud, or storm could destroy generations of labor in hours. Families displaced in winter faced death unless taken in by others. This is why hospitality mattered. Refusing shelter during winter was considered dishonorable and dangerous to one's reputation. A man's worth was measured by how many he could protect under his roof. As Christianity spread, longhouses began to change. Crosses replaced carved gods. Separate churches appeared. Burial rituals moved outside the home. But the core idea remained. Even as new beliefs arrived, the longhouse continued to define Viking life for centuries. Its form endured because it worked. Ever wondered how Vikings not only survived but thrived in the harsh, unforgiving landscapes of Scandinavia? The answer isn't just in their ships or their sagas, but in the heart of their communities, the longhouse. This wasn't just a building. It was the entire world for a Viking family, a marvel of engineering and a hub of social life. Let's step back in time and uncover the secrets of the Viking longhouse. When you picture a Viking home, you might imagine a simple rustic hut, but the reality was far more impressive. The longhouse was a massive, elongated structure, often stretching over 100 feet long, sometimes even up to 250 feet. That's almost the length of a football field. These buildings were designed to house not just one family, but an entire extended clan, including relatives, farmhands, and even livestock during the harsh winters. It was a self-contained ecosystem, a microcosm of Viking society under one massive roof. So, how did they build these colossal homes? The ingenuity is astounding. The frame was constructed from massive timber posts, often whole tree trunks, sunk deep into the ground. These posts supported a high arching roof, giving the interior a cathedral-like feel. The walls were typically made from watalandaba, lattice of woven branches packed with a mixture of clay, mud, and animal dung. This might not sound glamorous, but it was an incredibly effective insulator. Keeping the warmth in and the biting cold out, the roof was another masterpiece of practical design. It was usually thatched with thick layers of reed or turf. This turf roof was a living part of the house. It provided excellent insulation, was waterproof, and sometimes you'd even see goats grazing on top of it, keeping the grass neatly trimmed. The iconic curved shape of the longhouse, wider at the middle and tapering at the ends, wasn't just for looks. It was a brilliant piece of structural engineering designed to withstand the ferocious winds and heavy snowfalls of the north. The shape channeled the wind over the structure, reducing stress and preventing it from being blown away. Now, let's step inside. Imagine pushing open a heavy wooden door. First thing you'd notice is the smoke. A central hearth, or a series of them, ran down the length of the building. This was the heart of the home, providing light, warmth, and a place to cook. There were no chimneys in the modern sense. Instead, smoke would rise and find its way out through cleverly placed vents in the roof. The smoky atmosphere had an added benefit. It helped preserve the timber from rot and insects, making the longhouse incredibly durable. The interior layout was both simple and highly organized. The central aisle was a common area, a bustling space for cooking, working on crafts, and socializing. Along the sides, raised wooden platforms served as benches during the day and beds at night. Families would sleep here, huddled together for warmth under animal hides and wool blankets. The hierarchy of the household was often reflected in the seating arrangement. The chieftain and his family would occupy the most prominent spot, the high seat near the main hearth, symbolizing their status and authority. Life in the longhouse was a communal affair. From sunrise to sunset, the space would be filled with activity. Women would be grinding grain, weaving vibrant textiles on upright looms, and preparing meals. Men would be repairing tools, carving intricate designs into wood or bone, and planning for the next voyage or hunt. Children would be playing, learning the skills they would need as adults by watching their elders. It was a place of work, but also a place of stories. As the daylight faded, the longhouse would transform. The fire would be built up, casting flickering shadows on the walls. This was the time for storytelling. A skald or poet might recite epic poems of gods and heroes, tales of great battles and legendary voyages. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were the history, culture, and values of the Viking people, passed down from one generation to the next. The longhouse was their library, their cinema, and their school, all rolled into one. It was in this warm, smoky atmosphere that the great Norse sagas were born and kept alive. One of the most fascinating aspects of the longhouse was its role in animal husbandry. During the brutal Scandinavian winters, bringing your valuable livestock inside wasn't just an option, it was a necessity. One end of the longhouse was often sectioned off to house cattle, sheep, and other animals. This had a dual benefit. Firstly, it protected the animals from predators and the freezing cold. Secondly, the body heat generated by the animals provided an extra source of warmth for the entire building. It was a symbiotic relationship, a perfect example of Viking pragmatism. The people took care of the animals, and the animals in turn helped take care of the people. The longhouse also served as a workshop. It was here that the Vikings' famous craftsmanship came to life. Blacksmiths would forge tools and weapons, their hammers ringing out against the anvil. Woodworkers would craft everything from bowls and spoons to the intricate carvings that adorned their ships and homes. Weavers created the cloth for sails and clothing, often using natural dyes to produce stunning colors. The longhouse was a hive of industry, a place where raw materials were transformed into the essential items of daily life and the beautiful objects we admire in museums today. Archaeological discoveries have given us incredible insights into these structures. At sites across Scandinavia, Iceland, and even in North America at Lonso Meadows, archaeologists have unearthed the footprints of these great halls. By analyzing the post holes, the remains of hearths, and the artifacts left behind, they have been able to reconstruct what these buildings looked like and how people lived in them. We've found everything from simple cooking pots and tools to exquisite jewelry and gaming pieces, each object telling a small part of the Longhouse's story. So, what can we learn from the Viking Longhouse? It teaches us about resilience, ingenuity, and the importance of community. The Vikings built homes that were perfectly adapted to their environment, using local materials and clever design to create a comfortable and functional living space. They understood that survival depended on working together, sharing resources, and supporting one another. The Longhouse wasn't just a shelter. It was the glue that held their society together. It was a place of family, work, celebration, and tradition. The next time you think of the Vikings, don't just picture warriors on a ship. Picture them gathered around the hearth in their magnificent longhouse, sharing stories, crafting tools, and living a rich, complex life. The legacy of the Longhouse is a testament to their incredible ability to build not just structures, but strong, enduring communities. It's a powerful reminder that a home is so much more than just a building. It's the center of our world. Thanks for joining us on this journey back in time. If you enjoyed uncovering the secrets of the Viking Longhouse, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments what ancient structure you'd like us to explore next. Until then, stay curious.